After we found the first 4 victims, it was clear that there could be other human remains in that area.
Coming up on Crime Files.
The victim had been decapitated and both her hands were cut off. We're looking at that. We could have a serial killer.
This is the story of the hunt for the Gilgo Beach serial killer.
No suspects. Police admitted they have more questions than answers.
Before this sick bastard is caught, they're gonna find more bodies out here in these woods.
And how one small town community was turned into a murderer's dumping ground.
I want to understand what my sister went through when she realized, holy he's going to kill me.
Nearly a dozen bodies and claims of a cover-up.
There was definitely an intentional decision made to keep the FBI out of being part of the investigation.
Until a key break in the case that remained cold for more than a decade.
Police have arrested a suspect in connection with the Gilgo Beach murders.
I always believed that we would catch him.
Crime Files starts now.
We're breaking in now with major breaking news into our newsroom this morning.
So I'm up early, I turn on Channel 12 and I see you saying that there'd been arrest in the Gilgo case.
Suffolk County Police have someone in custody in connection to the Gilgo Beach killings investigation. It was the most heart-pounding moment of my career. The block is just flooded with police. This has been one of the most intense, prolific searches for a serial killer ever. I've covered some big stories. Nothing compared to the morning I got the tip that the Long Island serial killer had been arrested.
Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us, a predator that ruined families.
59-year-old Rex Heuermann was by all accounts a regular guy. He had a wife and 2 children, commuted to Manhattan to work.
He continued to use fictitious email addresses, fictitious identities, burner phones.
As we learned more about Rex Heuermann, the memories of 13 years ago just came flooding back. This case was so cold, many thought a killer would never be arrested.
Jones Beach is probably the most significant landmark on that island. Ocean Parkway, it's a really beautiful area.
When you think about small town communities, the ones along Ocean Parkway, they fit the bill.
Serenity here, you know, it's just so beautiful. We never hear of anything bad happening.
Less than 500 people live along that remote stretch of shoreline. In fact, most families only stay for the summer season.
Crime in those parts was almost non-existent. I can't ever remember reporting on something sinister along Ocean Parkway.
But everything changed the night Shannon Gilbert came to town.
Hello, you dialed into the 911 system. How can I assist you?
Shannon Gilbert was an escort. She was hired for the night, called to Oak Beach, one of those small beach communities not far from Gilgo.
Hello? Yeah. Do you need the police?
At some point, Shannon became scared and agitated. She called 911, pleading for help.
Yeah, there's somebody after me. Where are you, ma'am? I don't know.
Those were some of Shannon's last words. She disappeared that night.
She had been reported missing on May 1st. I became involved when I got a call from missing persons. They were looking for support from K-9.
They called in John Malia. He was an officer with the K-9 squad. He was meticulous in his search for Shannon Gilbert.
At some point, John made the decision to leave Oak Beach and start working along Ocean Parkway.
His tail started waving. He started sampling the air. At that point, I saw the skeletal remains of a body.
He found a set of human remains right off of Ocean Parkway, about a mile east of the entrance to Gilgo Beach.
It's been there a considerable amount of time. We'll have the medical examiner's office look at the bones and determine how long the person's been lying in the bushes.
Everybody made the presumption that we had found Shannon Gilbert, but Shannon Gilbert had a metal device in her jaw. At some point, she had been punched by her boyfriend. It was fairly easy to rule her out.
So this was a shock. A body was found on Gilgo Beach, but it wasn't the woman that everyone was out searching for. Take us through those next days.
The homicide section reached out to John and asked him to come back and do an evidence search because we thought we had a single homicide. And then about 1.6 miles west of that set of remains, he found a second set of remains, which was pretty shocking. Now we had 2 bodies dumped off of Ocean Parkway. Then John started to work east of the body and found a 3rd and 4th set of remains.
I don't think it's a coincidence that 4 bodies ended up in this area. Certainly, we're looking at that. We're looking at that we could have a serial killer.
We have Marine Brainard-Barnes, who disappeared July 9th of 2007. Then you have Melissa Bartholomew, July 12th of 2009, almost to the day, 2 years later. Then you have Megan Waterman, June 6th of 2010. Now you're talking about 11 months. Now you have Amber Lynn Costello, September 2nd of 2010, about 9 months later. I think everybody would say, well, it's becoming more frequent.
And the chilling part of all of this is how these victims were dumped, all eerily similar, as if the killer was leaving clues.
The women were all deposited in that area in a similar manner. They were wrapped in burlap, not the type of burlap you would use in a nursery. It was camouflage burlap to conceal a hunter. They were all similar in stature, fairly short, they were lightweight. They were all in the same line of work, they were all escorts. It was very clear that we probably had a serial killer.
As these bodies were being dug up, police say suspected serial killer Rex Heuermann was watching it all go down in his home that was just miles from the crime scene. But investigators didn't know that. So with no possible leads and no suspects, fear just took over the island.
Police admitted that at this point, they have no suspects.
We have no idea what we're dealing with.
Gilgo Beach and the nearby neighborhoods just turned into a circus. Police swarmed the scene and media crews surrounded the streets.
Suffolk police continue to look for more bodies.
These small, quaint communities were thrown into the international spotlight.
Bodies keep showing up.
It just seems like no one knows anything.
I don't want anybody to think that we have a Jack the Ripper running around Suffolk County with blood dripping from a knife.
It's bizarre, it's frightening.
It could be anyone.
Anything is possible at this point because there's so many unanswered questions.
All right, we're good, we're rolling. And whenever you want to start.
Somebody in New York called me, and she's like, have you heard from Amber? And I'm like, no, why? And they're like, are you watching the news? And I'm like, why? She's like, girl, put the news on, because they're pulling bodies up, and it's girls that's been missing off, escort sites. Right then, I knew. That's what happened with my sister.
It's sad, and I just wanted to get a chance to see where my sister was, but now I can't. And that's all I have to say.
Kim Overstreet is Amber Lynn Costello's sister. She tells us that she was with Amber just hours before she went missing that night on September 2nd, 2010.
She got a call, and it was nothing out of the ordinary. He called and was like, how much is it per hour? What services do you provide? He booked for that night, and she dropped me off, and that was it. It's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Kim told us her sister had a tough life, but this was a blow she never expected.
I was 5 when Amber was born, but we were always really close. I was scared to sleep by myself, so I would climb in her playpen with her. I just remember like she was my baby doll.
Amber was a struggling soul. She never had peace.
She was my sister. And I miss her. My life is so hard without her.
It turns out as police were searching for the killer, the suspect may have been doing a search of his own. Investigators say that Rex Heuermann was compulsively hunting online for pictures of the victims and their families. We're told he even asked Google why the killer hadn't been caught yet. Did you feel pressure?
Sure, I felt a lot of pressure. When we found 4 bodies, obviously the question is, are there more sets of remains there? Are there more?
And soon we found out there were.
Still ahead.
Police say skeletal remains were found yesterday in what could be the 5th victim of a serial killer here on Long Island.
More bodies lead to more questions.
Was it the same person dumping them in there? Was it an additional person?
But as more victims are discovered, there are new concerns that the case is being held up.
Do you think the FBI was intentionally left out of the investigation work of trying to find the killer?
When Gilgo Beach, Secrets in the Sand continues. Crime Files continues now with Gilgo Beach, Secrets in the Sand.
How is the investigation going? What are you doing? Where are we at? Do you have any suspects that can give me hope?
The search for missing escort Shannon Gilbert set off what became the hunt for the Long Island serial killer.
Before this sick bastard is caught, they are going to find more bodies out here in these woods.
4 bodies were found after Shannon went missing back in 2010 at Gilgo Beach, but Shannon wasn't one of them. And as investigators continued their search, more grisly discoveries were made.
Police say skeletal remains were found yesterday in what could be the 5th victim of a serial killer here on Long Island.
We went back into that area and then we found a 5th set of remains. That was a partial set of remains, a head, hands, and a forearm.
This latest victim was 20-year-old Jessica Taylor, who was also a sex worker. But here's the twist. Other remains belonging to Jessica were found 8 years before all of this, 45 miles east of Gilgo Beach.
Police say the body was found right there in that wooded area, about 300 feet back from here, Halsey Manor Road, just north of the LIE.
The victim had been decapitated and both her hands were cut off.
From December of 2010 to April of 2011, a total of 10 sets of remains were discovered across Long Island. The earliest murder dating all the way back to 1996.
We saw a bag with a bone sticking out. As soon as we opened the bag, saw a red toenail sticking through, and opened a little bit more, and it was a whole foot.
Again, there were striking similarities between all of the victims, but 2 didn't fit the pattern. One was a man, the other a toddler. One of the 4 bodies found last week is reportedly a child, found near the body of an adult, wrapped in a blanket.
Was it the same person dumping them in there? Was it an additional person dumping them in there? I mean, it really added a mystery to the case, but that really ramped up the necessity to search that entire area.
In December 2011, police finally found Shannon Gilbert's body.
Mary Gilbert breaks down and cries as she stands near the very spot where her daughter Shannon was last seen alive.
But at the time, they ruled her death an accident, not the work of a serial killer.
Based on the evidence, the facts, and the totality of the circumstances, the prevailing opinion is that Shannon's death, while tragic, was not a murder and is most likely an accident.
At this point, the Gilgo case grew cold, but victims' families still fought for answers.
They need to catch him, and they need to catch him quick. It disgusts me. I don't understand how somebody can just take a human's life for no reason at all.
I can't imagine what she went through.
Did you get to a point where you thought, there's no one going to be held responsible for my sister's death?
I mean, like I said, I had to come to an acceptance that I may never know.
While the families waited for any information that they could get, some of them say they still have the chilling memories of actually talking to the killer.
The mother of Melissa Bartholomew says the killer called them on her daughter's cell phone saying, "Do you think you'll ever see her again? You won't. I killed her."
And this guy is obviously sick.
Investigators say that call came from Heuermann after he killed Melissa, taunting her, admitting to murdering her sister.
The families were down at Gilgo many times. You know, I saw how distraught they were by the whole thing.
We're doing everything we can.
Yeah.
And, you know, we are still an active, ongoing investigation.
Trying to give the family closure was a large motivating factor. Everybody wanted to be involved in this case and find what was down there, irregardless of who the people involved were. The fact that they were sex workers didn't turn anybody off. Everybody wanted to find these people, give closure to the family, and support a case for someone that did these terrible things to these victims.
With no visible leads, there were concerns that the case was being held up by, of all people, the chief of police at the time. Jimmy Burke was being criticized for his handling of the case, along with the DA, his good friend Tom Spoda.
There was definitely an intentional decision made by both the district attorney at the time, Tom Spoda, and the administration that included Jim Burke to keep the FBI out of the kind of the heart of the investigation.
Do you think the FBI was intentionally left out of the investigation work of trying to find the killer?
I think the FBI was excluded from Suffolk County almost entirely for a period of time, and that was at the behest of primarily 2 people.
Why do you think it wasn't done?
I just don't think they wanted anyone looking over their shoulders, personally.
It's hard to believe the top cop and the DA wouldn't want to close the case and find the killer, but there was speculation of infighting and corruption within the police department.
Rumors rampant throughout the department that he was in trouble all the time.
And then came the arrest of Jimmy Burke.
Chief, do you have anything else to say, or are you still denying the accusations?
The controversy swirling around Chief of Department James Burke isn't going away.
Burke was arrested in 2015. He pleaded guilty to beating up a handcuffed man who was suspected of stealing sex toys, porn, and other items from his police truck.
He's been a sociopath ever since he was a kid.
Burke eventually resigned, and so did the district attorney, who was accused of trying to cover it all up.
I wish to make clear one thing. No one is above the law. Not an ordinary citizen, and certainly not the highest-ranking uniformed officer in the Suffolk County Police Department.
During Burke's sentencing, the judge laid into him, saying he led a corrupt system for years while lying to the feds. So it wasn't surprising that people were angry. They claimed all of the infighting and dysfunction overshadowed the search for the serial killer.
You need to work with other law enforcement agencies. You need to be totally collaborative. The public expects you to do that, and that's really the right thing to do. And if you have integrity, that's really what you need to do.
Time ticked on, and the Gilgo Beach killer continued to elude police until 2022, when the new DA, Ray Tierney, took office.
There was not a coherent plan, and I think that the one thing that we were able to do, one thing that we were really forceful with, was let's keep this about the case.
His team formed the Gilgo Beach Task Force.
The case goes unsolved. So the way you sort of combat that is you take all of the evidence, you make no assumptions, and you look at the evidence with a fresh eye, with a fresh view.
And that fresh look was the game changer.
Coming up.
We identified the suspect and started to put all the pieces together.
The hunt for the Gilgo Beach serial killer intensifies as a suspect is now in sight. How a pizza crust helped crack the case that remained cold for more than a decade.
A major break in the case. It's linked to pizza, of all things.
When Gilgo Beach Secrets in the Sand continues. Crime Files continues once again with Gilgo Beach Secrets in the Sand.
More than a decade after the first victim was found, there were still no answers in the Long Island serial killer case. So the Gilgo Beach Task Force was formed to reignite the investigation.
The first meeting of the task force was in February, and then, we were sort of off and running by March 14th.
And that's when they got a break in the case. Police say they were able to track down a distinctive-looking vehicle that they had been searching for the past 13 years, a Chevy Avalanche that Amberlynn Costello was seen picked up in the night she disappeared. Amber's roommate also said a man who looked like an ogre was driving it.
We learned that there was a Rex Heuermann in Massapequa Park that matched the description of this very large individual, owned this specific type of vehicle.
Massapequa Park is about 15 miles from Gilgo Beach. Investigators already had that community on their radar, though, because of cell phone data they tracked back to burner phones. Phones they say the suspect used to contact his victims.
He was doing Google searches. There were a lot of searches with regard to the Long Island serial killer investigation.
He was compulsively searching not only pictures of the victims, pictures of their relatives, their sisters, their children, and he was trying to locate those individuals. There was a lot of torture, porn, and depictions of women being abused, being raped, and being killed.
Heuermann was also an architect who worked on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And that's where investigators got their next piece of crucial evidence they say they needed to finally tie this all together.
Of course, we need a DNA profile to compare with what we have at the scene.
It all played out like an episode of CSI.
We told them, if you get the opportunity to capture some abandoned DNA, take it.
Detectives followed Heuermann after his lunch break one day. They found a pizza box that he tossed out in the trash. Inside that box was a leftover piece of crust.
There was also 5 hairs that were found at the dumping sites.
So with those hairs and the DNA from the pizza crust, the task force said they were finally ready to move in. This is a look at what's happening in Massapequa Park right now. Multiple command units on site there. Rex Heuermann was taken into custody just steps from his office as he was walking to Penn Station that night to head home to his wife and 2 kids on Long Island.
We wanted to arrest him at his business, primarily because of the guns. We knew that he had registration for 92 handguns, so we figured he would have at least that amount of guns in the house, and of course, that was the case.
Early that next morning, we started getting calls into the newsroom. They were Heuermann's neighbors, wanting to know what was happening on their block and why there was so much police activity.
All the neighbors here are shocked. They say this area is a quiet one, and now their neighborhood is the center of the news universe.
Heuermann has a wife and 2 adult children. All of them live together in the small, red home.
This guy was just in our neighborhood hiding out. This has been going on for over 10 years. It's insane.
He's an individual who lived 2 lives and had the life that sort of everybody in the public saw, and then this other life that he kept hidden from the public.
Who would think that an architect in Manhattan on 5th Avenue with a wife and kids in a Massapequa neighborhood would be a killer? If there's anybody out there that hasn't been found yet, if there's any girls that's families are in turmoil like I've been, give them rest, give them peace.